a listener sent me an article that I want to address, and I'll give you my predictions for this week's episode of Game of Thrones. Welcome to the newest episode of SDW.
Super Dario World!
It's a me,
Dario!
Woohoo! Let's go!
So I'm going to head out to Vegas this weekend, and I'm really, really late, so I'm going to keep this real short. A quick reminder that the podcast is now officially on iTunes, so please subscribe there. You can easily find it by typing in Super Dario World Podcast in the iTunes Store search bar. You could also rate me there. I really appreciate it. Still 5 stars, still going strong. I appreciate every single person who's given me a 5-star rating. It means a lot. It keeps me motivated. I appreciate it. If you don't like iTunes, you can also find the podcast on SoundCloud and YouTube. Still not the iHeartRadio app yet. But again, like I said, news on that coming soon. As always, please add me on social media. You can find me on Instagram at Dario the Show. You can always contact me there with any comments, questions, or suggestions. The feedback is still amazing. I got kind of a negative comment, but I will add that to the whole conversation that I'm going to go into with this article. And it's about Game of Thrones, so let's get started. So I'm going to jump right into it. This is an article that was sent by a listener, and the reason why he sent it is because this is the title of the article. Game of Thrones. The Arya is a Mary Sue take is the dumbest opinion on the internet. End title. So, okay, I can see why the listener would think that title would immediately get my attention, and he was right. While I need to be perfectly clear about this. By the way, spoiler alert if you haven't seen episode 3. I do not believe that Arya is a Mary Sue. I don't think I made that argument. I made the argument that Daenerys is a Mary Sue. And this all came about after last week's episode, because apparently people are pissed off at Arya after last week's episode. Rightly so, I believe. But I don't think I've ever made that argument. However, after reading that article, I was pissed off because I think the person who wrote it is an idiot. The arguments, first off, I really appreciate that he explains in the article what a Mary Sue is. And it's basically a character that has no flaws, that everything comes easily to them, that they have no issues, that everything always goes their way easily. Now, I don't believe that describes Arya. Arya has had to go through a lot, starting with the death of her father and being stranded and kidnapped left and right. And she has had to overcome a lot of obstacles, and she has a lot of personality flaws. Now, that's earlier Arya. In the later seasons, I can see the argument for the Mary Sue, and I do not appreciate using earlier Arya as a shield for new Arya. But anyway, let me go a little bit into the article. I'll try to address it point by point, or at least the relevant ones. So I'm going to read a part of it right now. Start quote, Arya leaping through the air to bring down the scariest baddie in all of Westeros seems like a clear choice in retrospect. After all, she's been training in the art of being an underestimated small fry killing machine for literally years at this point. End quote. So let's start off with who should have killed the Night King. Because for starters, I don't think the Night King should have died there. Again, I complained about this, that the Night King died without saying a single line. And we know as much about him now as we did in the very first episode, which is nothing. Or that he's super powerful, that's it. So I've been asked the question, who do I think should have killed the Night King? So if things stay the way that the episode stayed, only I get to pick who killed them. I've debated this a lot with a lot of people. And the best argument I've heard so far, the one that I agree with right now, is you had 4 people in there that had Valyrian steel swords. That's Brienne, that's Jaime, Jorah Mormont, and Jon. They had swords. Arya had the Valyrian steel dagger. But everybody else had obsidian, which they could have used, but it doesn't matter. Let's stick with the Valyrian steel blades. Now, the scene made no sense. Arya ran out of nowhere, and she blew right past all the other White Walkers, all the zombies, and we just saw the distance that Theon had to run in order to reach the Night King. So it was a long distance, and nobody did nada. They just let the Night King die. So, also, Arya's kind of short. She's like 5'0". So seeing over all the zombies, over everybody, she knew exactly where the Night King was going to be. They opened up a path for her. So the whole scene was ridiculous. Completely and totally ridiculous. But the only way that I could accept Arya getting the kill is if it was an assist. Let's say, for example, if Brienne was fighting the Night King, Jon was fighting the Night King, the Night King was looking at the dragon, And, which, by the way, I'll get into the dragon in a minute, because it's also something funny that I learned. Well, I realized this is actually a Dario original, but anyway. So, if anybody was distracting the Night King fighting with a real sword, and Arya sneaks up on him, I could have understood that. In fact, I think it would have been really cool to have the 4 characters with Valyrian steel blades fighting the White Walkers, not the zombies, the real White Walkers again, and the Night King. I think that would have been a fun battle. And Arya sneaks in, quiet and cat-like, and kills him. I could have understood that. If the moment that the Night King turns and grabs Arya, Bran would have tried to warg him, and it becomes like a battle of the minds, and Arya takes that opportunity to get him, I would have understood that. But Arya just showing up out of nowhere, nobody stopping her, it made no sense. And this is the second time that stupid knife has killed a character when they just completely behaved, when they were just acting completely out of character. The first case was Littlefinger, now it's the Night King. It's ridiculous. But anyway, so you got the 4 characters with Valyrian steel blades. Who should have killed them? If we're taking out Arya with an assist, I'll give it to Arya with an assist, but the plot doesn't really revolve around Arya. She has her kill list, and the Night King was never in it. She could have added him, but she was never in it, so it was never really part of a plot. Anyway, the guy that would have made the most sense is probably Jon, because that has been Jon's story. Fighting the Night King, and you add a little bit in there of the Battle of the Bastards, but mostly his story has been about the Night King. That's his enemy, that's his nemesis. It made the most sense for him to do it. However, the one that I like the most, and the one that would have been definitely the most poetic, would have been Jaime Lannister. Now let me explain. Because I don't like Jaime Lannister. The dude bangs his sister. He's a creep, and he broke all his vows. But anyway, I don't like Jaime Lannister, but he would have made the most sense. Why? Because how does Jaime start off in this story? He's a scumbag, right? He's known as the Kingslayer. Well, he's the Kingslayer because he killed Aerys Targaryen, right? That's gave him his nickname, that brought him into infamy, that made him a disgraced knight, pretty much. So, if you close out his story with him killing the Night King in the service of Daenerys Targaryen, the daughter of the king that he'd already slayed and brought him into infamy, using the sword, the ancestral sword of the Starks, because I don't know if you remember this, the sword of the Starks, the giant one, Ice, was broken down into 2 swords. One was wielded by Brienne, that is Oathkeeper, and the other one is wielded by Jaime, which is Widow's Wail. So Jaime Lannister, the Kingslayer, killing the Night King in defense of the ancestral home of the Starks, wielding the ancestral weapon of the Starks in the service of the daughter of the king that he killed, that is a beautiful, poetic wrap-up to a redemption story. It is perfect, and nobody would really see it coming, because does Jaime Lannister really have a beef with the Night King? They've never been together. They've never seen each other. Who even knows if he believes that he's real? But it doesn't matter. I feel like that would have been the most proper ending. I don't think that they should have killed the Night King so soon. But if somebody had to do it, I feel like that would have been the best answer. That's the one that I'm subscribing to. I wish they would have gone that route. They didn't, and we got Arya. But okay, anyway, I want to get that out of the way. I also want to get the dragon thing out of the way, because at first, I remember last episode, I was really upset that Drogon did not kill the Night King, because I made this comparison. Being hit by a dragon is the equivalent of being hit by a nuke, at least in that world. So he survived the nuke, but got killed by basically a gun. Because Dragonfire didn't kill you, a Valyrian steel blade killed you. Is it basically surviving a nuke, being killed by a gun? However, I changed my mind. Because at that moment, I was using medieval fantasy logic, and that was actually a mistake, because it makes no logical sense there. However, it makes perfect logical sense if you follow Pokemon logic. Because think about it. The Night King is an ice type. Maybe a dark type, maybe a fairy type. So, ice type has an advantage against dragon flying. So when he hit Viserion in the air, it killed him because it was 4.5 times the damage. No wonder it was a one-shot kill. And so, Drogon trying to hit an ice type with a dragon attack, not going to kill him. That's why he survived. It does half the damage, bro. Jesus Christ. That's why you had to run away, because you knew that if he gets hit by ice, you're done. Dragon flying against ice, double disadvantage. However, ice type is weak against steel. So it makes sense that the Valyrian steel blade killed him. So there you go. For those of you who are as pissed off as I am that, that doesn't make any sense, Pokemon logic comes to the rescue again. We forgot. We didn't know that D&D were Pokemon fans, so there you go. Now it makes sense. Oh, by the way, D&D are the creators of the show. David Benioff and Dan Weiss. Is that how you say it? Weiss? I think so. Anyway, I hope that made you feel better. I felt better after realizing it. You're welcome. That's a Dario original. Hope it helped. Anyway, let's move on to the article. Oh, let's return to the article, actually. So the claim that he makes that Arya is the clear choice to do it, in retrospect, I disagree. Jaime is the clear choice. It would have been way better. But okay, let's move on to his next point. Start quote. Nobody has earned their skills in Game of Thrones the way Arya has. She has literally been training to be a fighter and assassin since the very first season, as a child. End quote. Then he goes off to list that she trained with Syrio Forel, then she learned from the Hound, then the House of Black and White, all that stuff. Here's the thing. The character that we've seen train the most throughout the series is actually Brienne. And she starts off already being kind of a badass. Because if you remember, the first time Brienne appears on screen, she's actually beating up Loras Tyrell in a tournament. So she was already, she had already earned her skills. She'd already trained her entire life. And then throughout the show is the character that we see train the most. Maybe there's a point where Jaime's practicing to learn how to use a different hand, but nowhere near as much as we've seen Brienne and Pod train. She's the one that's earned her skills the most. Now, did Arya train with Syrio Forel? Yes. She trained with a wooden sword. Basics. Basically, Syrio Forel had her running around the castle chasing cats and practicing balance. Helpful skills. Yes. But she really did not get into the whole sword fighting thing yet. He taught her the basics. Then she practiced throughout her journeys with a stick. She didn't really practice with needle because she had to keep it hidden most of the time. And when the Hound took her, Hound took needle because he wasn't going to leave her being armed. So she did learn a little, and she practiced with sticks, but she never really got into it. And again, practicing by herself. Syrio Forel gave her the basics. She did not make her a master. She was still a child. Only basics. Now, after that, she went to the House of Black and White, and we saw Arya wash dead bodies, be blind, and train with a stick. Now, fighting with a stick, I'll give it to you because she was blind and she learned how to fight with it. And I'll give you balance skills. So I'll give you sneaking around. Cool. I'll give you those skills. But I've said it before. Training with one weapon is not the same as training with another. Completely different set of skills. An expert longsword fighter can get injured using a samurai sword. It's a completely different style. And so I'll give you an example. A baseball player would not do well as a tennis player. Both sports require you to hit a ball with a stick, but completely different skill set, completely different challenges. It's not the same thing. Even a basketball player, switch him out with a soccer player, not the same thing. You need to practice a different set of skills. And the only things that we've seen Arya practice with is with her needle, with a stick, and with a bow staff. We never saw the people from the House of Black and White actually teach her any assassin skills. Just fighting, basic defense skills, but we never saw them train her to be a killer. Go back and watch the seasons. It never happened. Okay? So let's move on to, let's return to the article. So the next quote is, all right, start quote. We even see Arya practice the exact same knife drop maneuver she uses against the Night King when she and Gwendolyn Christie's Brienne of Tarth spar back in season 7. End quote. Now, this one I would give you except for one reason. We've never seen Arya really practice anything with a knife. Again, different style weapon, different type of practice. If throughout the show, they would have shown Arya playing around with knives, doing the knife dance, throwing knives, okay. But we never really see Arya practice with any knives. None. None whatsoever. No practice. Nada. She just magically learned a skill for out of nowhere. We'd never seen her fight with a knife before, and all of a sudden, she's an expert knife fighter. Doesn't make any sense, and knife fighting is hard. You have no idea how deadly a knife can be. I had a retired police officer once tell me that more cops get killed or injured by knives than by guns. Also, and I'll use another film example here, Leon the Professional. What's one of the basic things that Leon teaches the little girl there? That knives are the weapons of the top, the alphas, the apex. Because the better you are, the closer you can get to your enemy and the quieter you can be. So amateurs use snipers, experts use knives. So it requires a whole lot of training, a lifetime of training in order to get that good. And we never saw Arya do it. You can argue, well, she did it off screen in her travels. Doesn't matter. We never saw her do it. This is a TV show. show, don't tell. The rule in film is show, don't tell. They never showed it. I don't care what you're telling me. You didn't show me anything. Moving on to the next point. Start quote. Arya earned her skills through observation, hard-won victories, and brutal training. End quote. So in the real world, observation helps, but what you need is muscle memory. And like, for example, I could watch a buttload of football. That would not make me a good football player. You know what would? Practice. And hard-won victories, I'll give her a few, but again, most of those were with needle. And brutal training, again, we saw her training with a stick while blind and with needle. We never saw her training with anything else. But anyway, let's move on to the next one. Start quote. She escaped assassination after getting stabbed repeatedly. End quote. Now here is where the character of Arya takes a turn. That specific moment. Or you could argue that the entire show took a turn there, not for the better. And that's where I started disliking her. Because if you remember, Arya got stabbed in the stomach by the waif several times. So an expert assassin stabs you in a non-lethal place. She could have easily been stabbed in the liver, in the spine, in the lungs, in the heart, anywhere. No, but she gets stabbed in a non-lethal place. Okay, maybe the waif fucked up. I'll give it to you. Then she escapes by falling on water, a river. So usually rivers that go through cities are filled with human feces. That's how that works. That's where usually all human waste in a city falls on, or if they were just throwing it on the streets like they did in medieval times, eventually the rain is going to bring it to that river. The point is, that river must have been disgusting and filled with bacteria. Arya walked out of there without any infections. And I know what you're thinking, Dario, you're being ridiculous. Infections? Come on, you're pushing it. If you remember, back in Season 1, Khal Drogo died because of a little cut on his chest from an infection. So, infections being deadly in medieval times are a real thing. And immediately after getting stabbed multiple times in the stomach, she falls into a river filled with dirty water, magically doesn't get infected, is not pursued by the waif immediately, manages to make her way all the way to an actress's house who happens to be a healer and apparently has a buttload of medicine and clean water to clean out the wound and all that stuff, heals her up. Then when she's attacked by the waif again, she jumps out of a window. The wound does not open. She runs away all throughout the city, hitting things, falling, sliding. The wound doesn't open until closer to the end. And I don't remember what she did. I think she jumps over a cart, and that's when the wound opens again. And then manages to defeat the waif because she turned off the light and she was fighting with Needle. Now, you can make the argument that maybe the waif was not expecting Needle, but she was an expert assassin, and the whole fighting in the dark thing, the waif trained in the dark as well. If we're assuming that they went through the same training, we're assuming that the waif trained to fight in the dark as well. But whatever. Out of all the ridiculous things in that sequence, the least ridiculous one is that Arya managed to beat the waif with a sword. I'll give you that one. So it's at that moment that the character of Arya took a turn, and she was massively protected by plot armor. Plot armor is something that we call when the writers are protecting a character and they survive anything basically because of bullshit. Because Arya surviving that is pretty much bullshit, right? Can we agree on that? Can we agree that Arya surviving at that moment, unless she's fucking Wolverine, it was bullshit? So since that point, Arya becomes like this expert badass assassin. She had never trained as one before. She had training in other things. She had skills. She was a talented girl. But becoming a cold-hearted badass assassin out of nowhere, after that moment, she went to the House of the Freys where she killed a whole bunch of adults and cooked them into a pie. And then she poisoned an entire family. Well, only the males, because apparently the women are good and they don't share any of the blame. I don't know. In the books, it's very different, but whatever. But, by the way, the logistics of that, getting a whole family together in medieval times, that means that she had to send out a whole bunch of letters, which means that she had to pretend to be Walder Frey for a really long time, because the time that it takes the Raven to reach the house, and then all the time it takes them to travel there, it's at least, a week? It has to at least be a week. So she pretended to be Walder Frey and slept with Walder Frey's wife for a week. It's fun to think about. And cooking somebody into a pie. Making pie crust is really hard. Cooking is not one of the skills that Arya was good at. So I guess you could say that she could have threatened one of the cooks to do it, but then the cook didn't say anything unless she killed the cook too. But what's the cook do? Anyway, the point is, since that point, Arya is a fucking psycho. After that, we see her go to Winterfell. And again, acting like a fucking psycho, told Sansa because she was sleeping in her parents' room. The Lady of Winterfell was sleeping in the room of the Lady of Winterfell, and apparently she wanted to cut off her face and become her. And after that, after they kill Littlefinger for no fucking reason, all of a sudden they're good again and they're friends and she's cool. I don't get it. Her character has been all over the fucking place and doesn't make any sense. And all the time, all the while, she's been protected by the plot. Because none of the things make any fucking sense. Everything just happens to fall her way. And okay, if from the point that she gets stabbed up to last Sunday's episode, you want to say that she was a Mary Sue, that's a valid argument. Because everything went her way. She earned none of those skills, but apparently was an expert at them. So I can understand her being a Mary Sue there. I can't say throughout, but at least in those 3 seasons, was it 2? No, I believe it's 2 seasons and a half. She's been a Mary Sue. Now, let's continue with the last point. And this is a long one. So, start quote. There isn't a character who has come further or earned her position and skills more than Arya Stark. That she was the one to kill the Night King, in hindsight, a great culmination of her arc, and maybe the smartest decision made for this episode. If you watch the last 7 seasons of Game of Thrones, it should be clear that there's no reason to label Arya a Mary Sue. So if you're really upset that the toughest woman in Westeros took down the show's biggest bad guy, you should take a long, hard look at your own biases and seriously rethink your position. End quote. So there's a lot there, and I'll start at the beginning. I think I've already proven that it was not a great culmination of her arc. If she would have gone in and sneakily killed Cersei, okay, that could have been a culmination to her arc. It may still happen. I don't know. The smartest decision made for this episode, I disagree. Smartest decision, as I already said, would have been Jaime. If she's the toughest woman in Westeros, no, the toughest woman in Westeros, as I said before, was Brienne. She has proven it time and time again. She spent most of the seasons, most of her story, in conflict or fighting somebody else or training. That's been her story. The toughest woman in Westeros is, by far, Brienne. Or unless you want to say maybe Melisandre because she has magical powers, but no. Tough. No, let's take tough, physically tough. It's Brienne. And the last part is what I took a real issue with. Because I hate when people make this type of argument. I'll say it again. You should take a long, hard look at your own biases and seriously rethink that position. Okay, so I don't like when people argue this way because basically what you're saying, if you don't agree with me, you're a sexist bigot. That's what he's saying, right? If we don't agree with his points because they're not logical, you're a sexist bigot. So I'm a sexist bigot for putting out points that disagree with his opinion. Now, he made points. I countered them, and I believe that mine are more valid. You can argue which one's more valid. Doesn't really matter right now because, you can't really reply. But he's saying that if you don't agree with me, it's because you're a sexist bigot. And I hate that. I hate people who make those arguments because you're closing your mind to other options. You should always leave open the possibility that you might be wrong. I live out my life walking around thinking I might be wrong. Now, the way that I can be proven wrong is give me a better argument. But no. In this case, making an argument against this guy makes you a sexist bigot, right? And if you're already set in your mind that, okay, if anybody disagrees with me, they're a sexist bigot, guess what? You're not going to listen. You're not going to listen because you already think that the person who's going to argue against you is a bad person, and you don't want to listen to bad people. No, it's a lot easier to just shut your mind and be like, no, I'm right. And if you disagree with me, it's because you're a horrible person. I'm a good person because I want to defend women. I want to defend a character, blah, blah, blah. And by the way, let's not kid ourselves. Okay, you know what? I can't say it for sure, and I don't want to slander the guy. But this article, if you read it, sounds a lot like a dude white knighting, which is basically when a guy stands up for a girl because he wants to get laid and believes her opinions or whatever, defends it just because he wants to get laid. Now, again, I don't know anything about this person. It sounds that way. Reading it, at first, I was like, dude, what's wrong with this person? Then I saw it was a guy who wrote it, and I was like, okay, yeah, dude's white knighting. I might be wrong, but that's how it sounded to me. If it sounds like a duck, looks like a duck, talks like a duck, it's probably a duck. Could be wrong. But anyway, my advice to this guy is don't be an asshole your entire life, because that's what you're doing. That's an asshole way of making an argument. I have nothing against somebody making an argument for something they believe. Go ahead, put it out there. I do it all the time. I make a lot of statements about things that I believe are logical, and I back them up. So you made your point. You tried backing it up. Keep yourself open to the possibility that you might be wrong. Don't end your stupid article saying, well, maybe if you should take a long, hard look at your own biases and seriously rethink your position, because we know what you're implying, okay? And it does make you an asshole, all right? It doesn't make you a better person. It doesn't make you better than me. It doesn't make me a sexist bigot. It makes you an asshole, and you know it. Or you know what? If you didn't know it, you should probably know it. You know, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt because I'm trying to give people the benefit of the doubt now. That's what it makes you, okay? So if he would have taken that last statement out, okay, it's just a guy who really likes Arya, wants to defend the point. But it's that last line that I have issues with. And the title of the piece, the guy was clearly looking for a fight, right? Can we agree? The Arya the Mary Sue take is the dumbest opinion on the internet. You're begging for a fight, dude. Because, I mean, the dumbest opinion on the internet, there's flat earthers out there, okay? Come on. Do better. Do better, GameSpot. I believe you. I like your articles. Just this one was kind of silly. Okay, so benefit of the doubt and free advice for anybody out there. At least that's my humble opinion. I believe that you should not end arguments that way. You should always keep yourself open to the possibility that you might be wrong. Listen to other people's arguments. And in case I've changed my mind so many times, and it's usually when people give me a good argument. So keep your mind open for that. Because you know what? It usually makes you look like an idiot. If you're 100% sure about something, you usually end up looking like an idiot. So that's my advice for today. And let's move on to my expectations because I'm going to do these quick. That took way longer than I expected. I had a lot to say apparently. So 3 things that I hope happen in the next episode of Game of Thrones. Number 1, since Ghost survived, I hope that somebody finally acknowledges Ghost. Because so far he's been there, but nobody has acknowledged him. It's a giant wolf. Nobody looks at him. Nobody's even looked at him. Nobody said, like, Jorah, before they were about to charge, like, let's go, Ghost. Something. Nothing. Nobody's even looked at Ghost. It's a giant dire wolf hanging out near you. Nobody's pet him. Nobody's looked at him. Nothing. Like, that's the only reason why I believe that how he could have survived last episode is because nobody noticed he was there. Nobody noticed. Like, all the White Walkers, they didn't even notice him. Like, the fucking giant white wolves from Princess Mononoke are like, we should have had that guy on our team. Apparently the dude's a fucking ghost. Nobody can see him. So, I hope somebody acknowledges him. This has been bugging me so much. It's just, they just added him with CGI on a random scene and did nothing. So, somebody out there, please acknowledge Ghost. Pet him. Look at him. Say the name Ghost. Let's go, Ghost. Something. Anyway, that's number 1. Number 2, I hope they finally wrap up the dumb Danny John drama. Just marry each other. It's an easy fix. It's the dumbest problem ever. This is a non-issue. All right? Wrap it up, people. Wrap it up. And number 3, I hope they send out ravens at least to the other lords. This one's kind of tied up with the thing that I hope doesn't happen. But okay. I hope they send out ravens to the other lords because the Vale's pretty much intact. And I want to see Street Rowan again. The Dornish army was mostly intact. The Tyrell army, that one didn't do so hot. No pun intended. But anyway, and the reason why it's tied up with the 3 things that I hope don't happen is because number 1, I hope that they don't give Daenerys an army out of nowhere. We saw most of your soldiers get killed. At the end, the only characters really left standing were the main characters. All right? We saw it. We saw most of your army get decimated. If you still have an army at the beginning of next episode, I'm going to be pissed. Because we saw the fucking Unsullied there get murdered. There was a few inside. We saw all the Dothraki get killed. Maybe there were a few inside. Doesn't really matter. Most of the army got decimated. And you can make the argument, well, maybe she had reserves. Why would you have fucking reserves if it's your final stand? You know what the word final stand means? It means you're thinking it's the last one, the most important one. You leave it all out on the table, and if you did it, you're an idiot. Which, by their battle plan, I guess they're idiots. So I get it's a valid argument then. Anyway, so I hope they don't do that. So if she's going to get an army again, I hope it's an army from one of the other lords. Tell him, like, hey, we killed the Night King. And honestly, I don't see why they'd believe him. Like, I don't see why Sue Robin's like, oh, cool. All right. They killed a creature that's mythological that there's no evidence that was actually ever there. So I'll believe you, sure. Here's some soldiers against Cersei. I don't like it. Number 2 is I hope they don't make Euron a chump. And this is bothering me because Euron's been a chump most of the fucking season. The guy had the upper hand always. Cersei had nothing going for her when Euron came her way. He gave her a fleet. He got her an army. He destroyed most of her enemies. She destroyed the enemy's fleets, broke the back of another army. So, the dude's gone above and beyond for fucking Cersei, okay? And he did it without having to. I made this point before. You remember when Robb Stark wanted to cross the twins? That's the Frey castle. And Walder Frey was like, if you want to cross, you're going to have to marry one of my daughters, and your sister's going to have to marry another one of my daughters, and so on and so forth. Well, you know why he did that? Because he had the upper hand. In Westeros, when you have the upper hand, you take advantage of it. So far, Euron has been given up the upper hand left and right. Now, at this point, the upper hand that he has is that he has the Iron Fleet. Cersei has the Golden Company. Fine, but you still need a fleet, okay? A fleet can, especially with King's Landing, if they attack you by the sea, you're screwed. So you need the Iron Fleet. So I hope they stop making him a chump and make him actually flex his muscles and be like, you know what? I don't understand why he wants Cersei. I mean, the dude already banged her, and he said that's the only thing he wanted to do. So I don't understand anything with Euron, but whatever. I hope they stop making him a chump and they actually make it like he's playing Cersei or anything. Give the guy something. He's a great actor. He's an interesting character, and you've given him nothing. He's one of the most interesting characters on the book. There was so much for you to work with, and you've given him nothing. And anyway, that's number 2. So number 3 of the things that I hope don't happen in the next episode of Game of Thrones is that this is another wasted episode. That nothing happens. And by that I mean that from the beginning of the episode to the end, nothing relevant changes plot-wise. Like it happened in episode 1 and episode 2, or the changes were minor. So minor and so unimportant. Particularly because there was supposedly a world-ending battle in the next episode. So, give us something. Do something. I can see this episode just being a whole lot of mourning and walking around and burning bodies and maybe making some plans, but I can see it just being another wasted episode. Don't. Do better. You have 3 episodes left. Do better. Okay? So, anyway, those are the top 3 things I hope don't happen in the next episode of Game of Thrones, and the top 3 things I hope do happen in the next episode of Game of Thrones. Monday, I'll be back here, and the show's off next week, by the way. The show that I work for, Rock 105.3's the show in San Diego. They'll be off, but I'll still be here. I'll make another podcast because I'm in the studio by myself, so I'll break down the next episode of Game of Thrones, this Sunday's episode of Game of Thrones, in another Good, the Bad, and the Martin. And that's it for today. Let me know what you think about this podcast. Thoughts, questions, suggestions. You can always contact me at Dario the Show on Instagram. That's it for today. So thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great weekend.